Special coverage of the 61st Munich Security Conference on the rooftop of the Hotel Bayerischer Hof. And joining me now is Polish Foreign Minister Radosław Sikorski. Thank you for your time.
Hello.
Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky says if not Brussels, then Moscow. Is he right?
To some extent, it's certainly a civilizational struggle. We represent the world of rules, of peace, of prosperity, and Putin has gone back to the world of Genghis Khan.
President Zelensky is also pushing for a European army. Would Poland be involved with that?
I think we should be careful with this term because different people understand different things. If you understand by it the unification of national armies, it will not happen. But I have been an advocate for Europe, for the European Union, to develop its own defense capabilities. And we are actually in the process of forming a reinforced brigade. That's not enough to deter Putin, but it's enough to perhaps sort out some warlord in Libya. If the US wants us to step up in defense, it should have a national component, a NATO component, but I also believe a European EU component. EU subsidies for the defense industry to build up our capacity to produce, but also an EU force worthy of its name.
Could an EU component involve Polish troops on the ground in Ukraine, perhaps after a ceasefire deal has been struck?
This is not a consideration because Poland's duty to NATO is to protect the eastern flank, i.e. its own territory.
President Zelensky has made some suggestion that Poland or the Baltics, that Russia is preparing to invade Poland or the Baltics, a NATO country. What do you make of that?
Putin's aims are extraordinarily ambitious, way beyond the capacity of his country, which he's ruining. Ukraine, through its heroic resistance, has given us time to prepare to effectively deter Putin. Putin can't win with Ukraine. I don't think he can win with NATO, but it doesn't mean he won't try.
Do you feel like NATO or the EU are taking the threats of Russia seriously enough when it comes to a potential NATO attack?
Well, the seriousness grows with the diminishing physical proximity to Russia. So yes, we as neighbors of Russia, we are sufficiently scared of his cruelty, of his hypocrisy, of his brutality. But further away from Russia, they also need to make their judgments that if Russia were to conquer Ukraine, the cost of deterring Putin would rise exponentially.
I want to draw your mind back to US Vice President J.D. Vance's address. He says he's not as worried about Russia and China as the risk of Europe losing its democratic values. Your thoughts on that?
Europe is a democracy. We have a different attitude than the United States to freedom of speech. In the US, it's almost absolute, whereas in Europe, we have libel laws. So there is just a difference here. He was right that migration is a concern for electorates everywhere. But in other differences that we have campaign finance rules. So, for example, in Romania, he cited the case. One of the candidates declared that he was spending zero on the campaign. Actually, someone was spending on his behalf huge amounts of money by our European standards. So these are just differences. But on the whole, it's part of a democratic conversation. Slight pity that President Vance did not communicate his strategic vision in the area of security. This is a security conference.
What did you make of that? The fact that he barely mentioned Ukraine, he didn't really talk about defence, but instead took a totally different tack. To some, they were shocked and surprised by that. Were you?
We were relieved because there was some press speculation that he might announce cuts in US military presence in Europe, and he didn't do that.
So you were relieved by...
Indeed.
You've also met with Ukraine envoy Keith Kellogg this week. Is a peace deal close?
Well, I met him bilaterally yesterday. I'm meeting him again together with my European colleagues. So it's good that there is this conversation with the US Special Representative for Ukraine.
JD Vance did make one mention of Ukraine, quoting, "We can come to a reasonable settlement between Russia and Ukraine." Does Ukraine have reason to be worried about that word, what reasonable means?
Well, I'm sure the Russian and the Ukrainian definitions are radically different at the moment. But this is just talk about possible future negotiations. It's I think, feeling the lay of the land, of discovering of what's acceptable to whom.
What sense did you get from Keith Kellogg about what the US plans in Ukraine?
The conversation, again, has only just started.
So you're looking forward to having a more...
But what I believe we need to do is to plan for the support of Ukraine for the medium term, for next year and the year after. We need to convince Putin that we are not seeking business as usual at any price, that we are prepared to stay the course, that we think this is a colonial war. These colonial wars usually take up to a decade. Anything shorter than that would be a bonus, but we can wait him out until his economy collapses.
And so you're looking forward to further conversations with Mr. Kellogg?
We need to synchronize. Every new administration discovers certain things afresh and has, its own ideas. That's perfectly legitimate, and we need to synchronize our actions.
How does Donald Trump picking up the phone direct to Vladimir Putin, how does that change the equation, change the negotiation, especially before talking to Volodymyr Zelensky on the phone?
We shall see. Donald Trump believes in personal diplomacy. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. We hope it works in a way that preserves Ukrainian independence this time.
Are you optimistic it will be?
We shall pray for it.
Russia used drones to attack Chernobyl this week. How dangerous is this, not just for Ukraine, but for Europe? Is this type of warfare playing with catastrophe?
Well, these Russian drones fly all over the place. We've had news that Belarusians are shooting down rogue Russian drones that are in imminent danger of breaching NATO airspace. It's really irresponsible of the Russians to be fighting a war against a country that has nuclear power plants, because you cannot predict when these out-of-control drones, where they will go. And if this one struck Chernobyl, which it looks like it, you never know what might happen. The last time, in 1986, when Chernobyl blew up, all of Europe was affected, from Finland to Poland, Western Europe, and you never know when the wind will blow. So I've argued before, and this strengthens my argument, that for the sake of our own interest, we should strengthen Ukraine's anti-aircraft and anti-missile capacities.
And on a domestic front, President Duda insists Fort Trump, a permanent US military base, will be built in Poland. Do you think that will happen?
Well, I'd like to see evidence of President Duda's friendship with President Trump on behalf of Ukraine and on behalf of US presence in Europe. I'd like to see the evidence of that. For the last 2 months, I haven't yet. So I'm again urging President Duda to use his friendship on behalf of Polish interests.
And lastly, JD Vance says there's a new sheriff in town. Is the new sheriff President Trump? Does he care about European security?
Well, we are allies, and that means that our predecessors have made a judgment that our security interests are intertwined. It is a bargain, actually. If you, the US, help us with deterring Russia, we will help you with your rivalry with China. There are all these deals, and they are reciprocal. We assume that the US will protect us from Russia. We sent a brigade to Iraq and to Afghanistan. There's a give and take.
Polish Foreign Minister Radosław Sikorski, thank you again for your time.
Pleasure.
And that's all for this exclusive interview here on TVP World. I'm Aaron Darman. Goodbye for now.